In this lecture, we will explore the basic assumptions of social cognitive learning theory, also known as social learning theory, and look more closely at three main applications of this theory to the educational setting: modeling, self-efficacy, and self-regulation. During week 3, we looked at the theory of behaviorism, which posits that learning can be observed by a change in behavior. It emphasized the impact of external events on the individual in order to teach the individual a new skill, idea, or behavior. Social cognitive theorists argued that one can also learn by observing others, meaning a student can learn a new skill, idea, or behavior by watching others and the consequences that may follow. Social cognitive theorists demonstrated that students could learn vicariously. This was a big shift in thinking at that time. As noted in your text, the social cognitive learning theory is based on the work of psychologist Albert Bandura. The basic assumptions of the theory are: people can learn by observing others. Learning is an internal process that may or may not lead to behavior change, meaning that not all learning can be observed externally, which is what behaviorists believe. Cognitive processes influence motivation as well as learning. What we think has an important effect on our learning, actions, and behavior. People and their environments mutually influence each other. Behaviorists believed that the environment impacted the individual, but social cognitive theorists believe the individual also impacts the environment, often through his or her behavior. The causational relationship between these three components, person, environment, and behavior, is defined in your text as triadic reciprocal causation and is the foundation of Bandura's theory. Lastly, behavior becomes increasingly self-regulated. As children age, they regulate their own behavior more and more. Similar to behaviorists, social cognitive theorists believe that reinforcement and punishment influence learning. However, they further believe that cognition plays an important role in this process. Some of the key assumptions of social cognitive theory as it relates to punishment and reinforcement are: the learner must understand the contingency, meaning the student has to realize the connection between the behavior and the reinforcement or punishment. Learners will base expectations on existing patterns. Students are watching and registering patterns of reinforcement and punishment all the time, and they may make decisions about their own actions based on those existing patterns. Moreover, learners base their expectation on what happens to others, meaning a student does not need to experience the reinforcement or punishment in order to learn what is expected. Vicarious reinforcement is when a student learns what to do based on the experience of a peer or model. For example, a child is praised for raising his hand in class, so his neighbor follows suit. Vicarious punishment is when a student learns what not to do based on the experience of a peer or model. For example, a child is put in timeout for hitting on the playground, and his friend learns, if I hit on the playground, I will end up in timeout. Students also learn what is acceptable when no consequence is given. For example, a student sees her friend walk in late each day and the teacher says nothing. The student realizes it's okay to be late for class. Social cognitive theory has three main applications to learning: modeling, self-efficacy, and self-regulation. Models can be live, a real person we observe, or symbolic, characters, real or fictional, portrayed in various forms of media: books, movies, television, social media, etc. However, students do not model all the behaviors they observe. Typically, an effective model has the following characteristics. He or she is competent. The model is able to do the activity well. He or she has prestige and power. For example, a famous athlete or a social media influencer may be a model. Even a popular kid on campus has the ability to influence others. He or she exhibits behaviors useful to the learner's circumstance, meaning the model is in the same situation as the learner. and the learner identifies with the model. If a student identifies with another student, a parent, or teacher, she or he is more likely to imitate their behavior. This is important for school professionals to understand. Students are more likely to emulate the behavior of someone they feel is similar to them. Thus, at times, a peer model is more powerful than an authority figure model, meaning we must be mindful to explain how our modeling applies to them and to their circumstances, or provide a very relatable model. Successful learning, thus, requires the following conditions: attention, watching the model; retention, remembering what the model did; motor reproduction, doing what the model did; and motivation, the student is ready to demonstrate the modeled behavior. The second application is self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is what a person believes he or she is capable of doing or not doing. It's a person's judgment about one's self and one's abilities. To better understand self-efficacy and get a sense of your own self-efficacy, ask yourself these questions. Do you believe you'll be able to understand and apply educational psychology by reading the textbook and thinking carefully about its content? Or is the amount of studying you do useless? Do you think you could learn to execute a reasonable swan dive from a diving board if you were shown how to do it and given time to practice? Or would no amount of training help? Do you think you could walk barefoot over hot coals unscathed, or do you think the soles of your feet would be burned to a crisp? As you know from your reading, people generally have higher self-efficacy about situations or tasks with which they are familiar or comfortable. I suspect many of you have high self-efficacy for learning educational psychology. I also suspect a great number of you have a low self-efficacy for walking over hot coals. However, I do not care to assume, so if you do have a high self-efficacy for walking over hot coals, make sure to email me. Self-efficacy is important because it affects us in a variety of ways. Choice of activities. What we believe we are capable of impacts what we choose to participate in. For students, that could be related to course selection as well as extracurricular activities. Goals. People typically set higher goals for themselves when they have higher self-efficacy for the task at hand. For example, a runner with a high self-efficacy toward long-distance running may set a goal of running a marathon, while someone with low self-efficacy regarding running will not set that goal. Effort and persistence. With high self-efficacy comes attitudes and behaviors of persistence and effort. The person knows they can solve the problem and they persist until it is solved. For example, a mechanic comes across an unusual problem with his car. He is confident in his abilities to fix the car, so he persists in finding the solution regardless of how long it takes. Lastly, self-efficacy affects students' learning and achievement. Students with high self-efficacy tend to achieve and learn more because they believe they can, regardless of their ability level. Development of self-efficacy. As noted in your text on pages 189 and 190, self-efficacy is developed under the influence of four things. Personal accomplishments. How have I performed on things of this nature previously? Vicarious experience. I know someone similar to me who accomplished this very goal, thus I believe I can do it too. Verbal persuasion. For example, an older sibling tells a younger sibling, "Getting into college was a lot of hard work, but I did it and I know you can too." And emotional arousal. How do I feel when I think about doing said task? Feelings of anxiety or nervousness may prevent someone from completing the task. Feelings of excitement and energy may encourage someone to complete the task. The third application is self-regulation, which is the ways in which we alter our behaviors, thoughts, etc. to achieve a particular goal. It is self-chosen and self-directed. Here is another visual to help you understand the phases of the self-regulation system, which are laid out in your textbook on page 191. These phases come into play at various times as one pursues a particular goal or objective. Before, self-determined goals, self-determined standards. The student begins by deciding what goal is to be achieved and what standards of behavior will be executed in the process. These things guide the process of completing the task. During, emotion regulation, self-instructions, and self-monitoring. During this process, the individual is keeping track of his emotions, reminds himself of the steps and tools needed to complete the task, and is monitoring his progress. After, self-evaluation, self-imposed contingencies. After the task is completed, the student looks back and evaluates himself and his work. He gives himself reinforcement or punishment for his behavior and task achievement. Depending on the outcome, a new goal may be set or the current goal may be revised. Utilizing self-regulated behaviors in the classroom has been coined self-regulated learning. These are skills students typically need to learn and practice as they are not innate. As students age, they tend to use these skills more naturally, but in general, they are still learned skills that must be modeled in the classroom setting. They must also be practiced. Let's look at what the skills are and how a self-regulated learner uses them. Goal setting. A self-regulated learner has a goal in mind when reading or studying. Planning. A self-regulated learner makes a plan ahead of time to best use the time and resources available. Self-motivation. A self-regulated learner typically has high self-efficacy about their ability to complete the task. Attention control. A self-regulated learner tries to focus and drown out other distractions. Flexible use of learning strategies. A self-regulated learner chooses different strategies for different tasks, such as mnemonic devices or concept mapping. Self-monitoring. A self-regulated learner constantly monitors the progress she is making toward a goal. Appropriate help seeking. A self-regulated learner can recognize when she needs help and how to get it. Self-evaluation. A self-regulated learner evaluates whether or not they have reached their goal. Developing self-regulated learning skills has become an important objective in education. Therefore, it is important that as school professionals we understand how it develops and what can be done to foster it in our students. The textbook describes specific tactics and strategies for developing and promoting these skills and how we can teach students to become self-regulated learners. While the development of self-regulated learning begins to emerge in upper elementary grades, can young students be self-regulated learners as well? The answer is yes. It begins with co-regulated learning, where adults and children share the responsibility for the learning process. For example, a teacher selects 3 learning goals the child can work on, and he or she selects which one. They come up with a plan together, and the teacher encourages the student to persist toward the goal by redirecting attention and providing effective strategies. The teacher asks the student self-monitoring questions and prompts them to ask for help when needed, rewarding the child's appropriate help-seeking behaviors. Lastly, the teacher and student reflect on whether the goal was met and how it went. Thus, through modeling and cooperation, young students begin developing the framework for acquiring self-regulated learning skills. Co-regulating allows students to increase self-efficacy in a variety of environments and increases their ability to self-regulate as they mature. In summary, social cognitive learning theory, developed by Albert Bandura, established that behavior and learning was impacted by internal as well as external factors. Further, social cognitive theory revolutionized education by demonstrating that children could learn vicariously through the observation of others. Today, through modeling, students acquire many skills of behaviors, including self-regulation skills. In addition, self-efficacy, a cognitive process, impacts what models a student attends to and contributes significantly to a student's use of self-regulation skills. Self-regulation skills have been identified as an important aspect of student success in and out of the classroom.